Here we go for Unit 5, Topic 1, new unit. Last unit of review before we go and take the exam. All right, so Unit 5 is about agriculture mostly. We put in the land use and the patterns and the processes along with that. But I think it's safe to call it agriculture. Okay, so here in Topic 1 is an introduction. And there are the essential knowledges. Pages 195 through 197, 214 and 215 in the AMS code book cover the topic. And the first one of those objectives there gets into the environment and its impact on agriculture. Like so many things, I think this speaks for itself, but let's look at it. All right, soil. That's going to matter what you can grow and how well you can grow it. Types of soil, and as well as the nutrients in the soil. Remember, not all dirt's created equal. There's many different components in dirt, as you should know from science classes, and many different kinds of nutrients that come in different kinds of soil. Landforms, okay. Valleys are a wonderful place to grow, but mountains not so much. All right, plains are a good place to grow. Deserts, not so much. Those are all landforms, and they all play into it. You're going to have some kind of source of water. There's some crops that do better with less water, so they don't need as much, but obviously all of them are going to need some form. So when you get into that, an environment's going to need, depending on the crop you grow, with that. And of course, you don't so much get to make up your mind, I'm going to grow this, as you grow what you can. It'd be wonderful if we can grow avocados. We're a little too far north for that. So that doesn't really happen around here. Because we're missing these kinds of things here. And the main one, though, speaking of avocados, is climate. Because you can bring in the right kind of soil. You can put them in a pot. You can water them accordingly. But are you going to have the right climate for avocados? No, like I said, we're a little too far north on that. Same goes for everything. The two that are pointed out here, this isn't the only two climates out there, the only two types, but these are the two that are mentioned in the course description. Mediterranean, which obviously is for the most part on the Mediterranean, not everywhere around the Mediterranean, plus it's in other places besides the Mediterranean, down here in Africa, as well as the Mediterranean part of Africa, down here in Australia, down here in Chile, and right here in the United States, California. That's where that is. Tropical, that's where you get into more to like your bananas and sugarcane and things like that. 64 degrees Fahrenheit plus, and a lot of rain to be in a tropical, which is typically, here's our equator. So, it's considered to be in between the lines of tropics here. Not every one of those places, however, meets the precipitation amount. So not every one of those places, even though between the tropics, not every one of those places is going to have a tropical climate. All right, so that is the first bit of information in the course description. And the kind of questions that I saw with that are the types of crops, especially like in the Mediterranean. Just think about it. What do you think of when you think about Greece or Italy, olives and grapes and that kind of thing? And then it's going to ask some questions I've seen about climate importance. What place to most likely grow this? All right, to give you some choice. You have to kind of have an idea where those places are, what their climate might look like, see if it'd be too hot or too cold for the thing that they're asking. I even saw a question about climate change, which of course is basically going to push, if it was climate change currently being the climate getting hotter, would push things further north. If things shift and the climate starts to get cooler, not cooler than what it is right now, but cooler significantly, like they predicted a few years back, before they started predicting higher, it would push it south. Okay, intensive farming. The types, but again, this isn't all the types out there, but these are the types we're going to look at. We're going to look at 3 different types of farming here. Market gardening. All right, you remember Von Thun? We're going to get he's got a learning topic all of his own. But that market garden unit is the one closest to the city center. It's the one where you're growing products to be grown in the market, sometimes called truck farming. These are the things that will be grown directly for sale. All right. If you're growing watermelons and tomatoes, you can take those and sell them for sale. You don't typically go and buy wheat and things like that directly for sale. I guess you could argue that you do that with rice, but it's still a grain crop, so a little different. Cucumbers, strawberries, etc., like that. Plantation agriculture is very labor intensive. So is a lot of market gardening. These are people working. Looks like they're picking strawberries, or maybe smaller, like grape or cherry tomatoes. But it's very labor intensive too. Right? You don't get a big machine on these things for the most part coming through, taking things out. It's going to need to be done by hand. Plantation agriculture, even more so. It's going to take a lot of land. It's going to take a lot of labor. So they typically put that in some place where labor is cheap. If you remember United States history, the word in our country, plantation, is often put hand in hand with slavery. Well, that explains why. Because the plantation nature of mostly cotton is what we grew on the plantations here in the United States, need a lot of labor, hence slavery. Um, Not the case with these people, even though they probably don't get paid very much to be working on wherever that plantation is. Looks like they're growing rice. I'm going to guess Asia. Not just because of their hats, because they can wear those hats anywhere, take them with them. And then the mixed crop livestock. Mixed crop livestock is different from other things because they're mostly the crops they grow. Like here, they've grown some clover, some alfalfa, I don't really know, but it's for the cattle to eat. They're not growing it to sell somewhere else. Most of the crops they grow are for the direct consumption of the animals they are raising. It's intensive. It takes a lot of work. That's what these things mean. If you were wondering if something fits in there or not, that's how you would know. According to the course description, you have those too. Um, I've seen questions about this asking where this would fit in better. This would be you needing to know some climate. Um, I saw a real good question about scale on these. It was a good example of needing to know your scale and a good example of cross unit stuff. Um, Hawaii was singled out from the rest of the United States because of coffee, was what it was showing, which changes the scale because everything else was shown by the United States. It was asking if this map changed for other countries like it did for Hawaii, what are some areas that this color would change? So you look at some places that shows like a whole country being good for growing coffee, but only part of it is, like India was one of the answers to that question. There were a few. Okay, the last piece here is talking about extensive farming. And extensive farming isn't necessarily the opposite of intensive farming. It just doesn't. It takes more land. All right, intensive farming also takes more labor. It's more concentrated in the land area there as well. With this, you spread out a lot more. Right, shifting cultivation. That's what we call slash and burn. That's one of those things you might have done in a elementary school social studies. That's one of the things that doesn't get pushed out lots of times. They are destroying the Amazon rainforest because of this. You will hear many times, well, that's the natives' way of surviving. They don't use the same land over and over again. They use it until the nutrients are out, which when they burn the forest down, the first part, not only does it clear it for them, puts nutrients in the soil, but once it is no longer productive, they go and they cut another part out. They don't rotate crops. They don't practice any sort of other techniques that would keep them from having to claim more and more land, and at the same time they're deforesting the land left behind them. That is shifting cultivation. Just that farmer moving from one field to another permanently, not rotating crops. That's a different beast. Nomadic herding, that's what it is. People following their herds around that they raise up. They go where the food is for them and they move on. A little bit like that, but usually these people probably rotate more so than a shifting cultivator would with growing crops because the grasslands and whatnot for the sheep or the goats or whatever, it's usually the type of animals, llamas maybe sometimes, that are being raised under this type of herding. You can rotate around every few years probably. And then the last one is ranching. Just write out ranching. You let the animals fatten up so that you can take them to a feedlot to be sold and finished off and turned into our suppers. Okay, questions again with examples and where you might see it. Might give you a crop, show you a map, where might this be most likely to be grown, um, and then it might explain something and you would have to know. Pretty much the way all these kind of questions work. I think it would be a good idea for you to look at one of those maps of the types of farming, the agricultural types of things like shifting cultivation, nomadic gardening, plantation farming. Just be generally familiar with it, not memorize anything, but be loosely familiar with it, because that's the kind of application questions I see with it. All right, there we go into Unit 5, Topic 1. Thank you very much.